Hi, I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge and HypnosisDownloads.com, and welcome to Do Your Relationships Damage Your Self-Esteem? And what to do about it. 7 tips to make your relationship a self-esteem boosting one. Your self-esteem shouldn't be totally dependent on the person with whom you happen to be in a relationship with. But the fact is, relationships do have a big impact on the way you feel, and that includes the way you feel about yourself. So Mick's relationship, Mick was a client of mine, felt like a real burden to him. But it was a burden to which he'd become so accustomed, he didn't even know he'd been carrying it until he spoke to me and was able to lay down the load for a while. The pain of relationships that aren't working can become like a background ache. We don't notice they hurt because we've grown so used to the discomfort. So how's your self-esteem? How's your relationship? The two can be more intertwined than we realize. As soon as I suspected Mick's relationship might be having an impact on his self-esteem, I asked him a question that really made him think. And the question was this: what should a healthy relationship provide for the people in it? And Mick thought about this. Why Mick cried? So he told me, in reply to this question, self-esteem is important. And he was tentative, shy and uncertain as he described what a good relationship should be. He began to look sad and his eyes moistened. And he said, the person that you're with should care about you and let you know they care. They should be affectionate, build you up, focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses all the time. They should be honest when you screw up, he said, but still treat you with respect, and of course you should do the same for them. So all that sounds simple, doesn't it? By focusing on what should be in a healthy, mutually supportive relationship, it was brought home to Mick what he didn't have in his relationship, which is why he became tearful in that session. But my job isn't to make people feel bad, quite the opposite. So once we'd established what Mick and his wife Louise didn't have together, we set about building ways to help them both meet their needs within their relationship better. Self-esteem building in relationships. Mick was genuinely stunned on the rare occasions when someone would actually comment on the way his wife spoke to him in public. How can you let her speak to you like that? People would say. And he was really surprised when people would suggest that he do himself a favour and move on with his life, or tell him determinedly that they themselves would never put up with someone speaking to them like that. You should hear the way she talks to me sometimes, Mark, he said to me. And I'm reminded, he said, of Basil Fawlty in the famous sitcom replying to an extremely rude guest. I'm sorry, were you talking to me? I thought there was a dog in the room. The weirdest thing is that I just don't seem to notice it. It's come to feel normal, he said. And I asked him if he felt better about himself, more or less confident now than before he'd met Louise. And to me, he seemed diffident and unsure, afraid even. Well, now that you mention it, I do remember feeling more confident, like I had more self-esteem back before we got serious, he said. You know, we had fun at first, and yes, we both felt great about ourselves and each other, but bit by bit, it's all gone wrong, he said. I worked hypnotically with Mick to help him rehearse new patterns of behaviour to increase his self-confidence. But we also worked on some very practical strategies to help change the way he and Louise related to each other. And you'll find some of what we did in these relationship self-esteem boosting tips, and I hope they're valuable for you. So number 1, define just how your partner is undermining your self-esteem. To vanquish the beast, we need to know the beast. I'm not sure who said that, but I'm sure somebody did at some point. If your partner routinely makes you feel bad about yourself, which may be because they never actively encourage you to feel good about yourself, then think about exactly why that might be. For example, do they never compliment you in any way? Do they put you down? Do they always seem to put you last? Do they scorn or laugh at your dreams and aspirations? Do they constantly wax lyrical about the attractions of other men or women? Do they make disparaging remarks about you in company? Do they seem disinterested in you? Any long-term relationship may contain some of these elements some of the time, but as we know, when the bad times start to outnumber the good, a relationship is inevitably headed for trouble. See reference 1. So write down what your partner is doing and not doing that seems to be damaging your self-esteem. Don't look for reasons, just write down what seems to be happening. That's just an observation. Next, number 2, look to yourself. It's just that she seems so resentful. Mick described how Louise would make sour remarks about him, even in front of his and her friends. Why would Louise be resentful? How do you treat her? And he thought about this, and he had to admit that he'd stopped bothering, that he rarely said anything positive or complimentary to her. And he maintained that he didn't actively criticize her the way she did him, but he was fair-minded enough to see that he had stopped being nice to her, as he put it. And it's not that our partners should always back us up or support us, even when we're being rude or mean or they just don't agree with what we're doing. But there needs to be a general background sense that they're essentially supportive of you as a person. They have both lost this sense. And the next tip can feel hard at first. So number 3, re-establish self-esteem in relationships by ditching the blame game. Sure, Louise had no right to talk to Mick the way she did, and he felt that because of the way she was to him. Well, why should he have to bother with her? So it was a sort of vicious cycle. Egg before chicken, stalemate. Your move. And this is how I put it to Mick. It's your move, my friend. Okay. And of course, naturally, he felt, well, I didn't start this. Okay, so we're in trouble. But if you change one part of a system, and yes, a relationship can be viewed as a system, you said romance was dead, then the whole system has to change. So the quickest way to change the dynamic of a relationship is to change what you do in that relationship. You change one part of a Rubik's Cube, the whole cube shifts. So number 4, change one part of the whole relationship, and the relationship changes. I suggested to Mick we needed to prove that Louise really was the main cause of his rapidly shriveling self-esteem. And he agreed with this, and then resolved to begin actively saying complimentary things to her over the coming week, to focus on her strengths regardless of how she was to him. And it was going to be tough, but he said he'd do it. So the next week he said, you know, it was strange, Mark. I said nice things to her. I encouraged her and focused on her strengths. And you know what? She still put me down, still criticized me, even laughed at me. But it was like she was going through the motions, through sheer force of habit. She seemed more upset somehow, more sad when she did that. Like she wanted to be nice, but didn't know how. I suggested that she wouldn't change overnight, but this may indicate that the self-esteem bashing pattern that Louisa got into may last be loosening a bit. And as it turned out, over the coming weeks, she began to soften and they started to grow bit by bit closer again. But someone had to start this process off. By complimenting her, Mick was actually demonstrating her own behaviour back to her. Not by pointing it out to her, she would have just argued with him, but by letting her unavoidably see how different she was behaving toward him than he was behaving toward her. And I know it's more fun to blame than to stand back and look at one's own part. And after all, maybe you really don't have much of a part in all of this. Perhaps you are with a narcissist or someone who's just very mean. Perhaps your partner is naturally controlling or manipulative and seeks to build themselves up by putting you down. That's possible. But it's also worth examining the way you've been relating to your partner as well as the reverse. And this is like a test to see whether your partner can respond to you being different. So let's go back to that. Does your partner possibly have a vested emotional interest in making you feel bad about yourself? And this is important. So number 5, think about what motivates your partner to crush your self-esteem. So you may have heard of the term feeder. And this is a term for a man, usually a man, who purposefully and often secretly adds calories to his woman's diet in order to get and keep her fat, and thus keep her. Men may feel that whilst their girlfriends or wives are fat, they won't run off with another man because, well, you know, other men won't be attracted to them, although of course some men do like larger women. The woman will feel so lacking in confidence she'll count herself lucky to have any man, which means him. And so someone who constantly puts you down tries to blunt your self-confidence and dents your self-esteem, maybe consciously, or we have to concede even unconsciously, trying to keep you attached to them specifically by telling you such things as, who else would want you? Or you're lucky that you met me, or I've got lots of other people interested in me. I'm doing you a favor by being with you. I could have married so-and-so, and sometimes I wish I had, that kind of thing. So do you suspect sometimes that your partner is attempting to bolster their own self-esteem by trying to damage yours? If so, see this for what it is, a reflection of them, not you. Number 6, look elsewhere to bolster your self-esteem. And no, I'm not suggesting you have an affair, although actually affairs are often not just about sex. Unless someone is a serial adulterer, they usually happen for a reason. Both men and women may stray if they find someone who actually gives them what they need, but haven't been getting, from the partner they've been with. Just as plants and flowers will lean toward a source of sunlight or moisture when these requirements have been lacking chronically in another place. What I'm saying is, get a wider view of yourself. So I asked Mick to list the 3 main criticisms his wife routinely leveled at him. And he responded that she said he was fat, lazy and unambitious. These are the 3 things that she came back to. And he really had come to believe that this was an accurate description of who he was. I then got him to ask 5 trusted friends to comment honestly on how they saw him. And they said things like, you're heavier than you were 20 years ago, but you're in much better shape than most men your age. One even said how his wife was always commenting on how hard Mick worked and how gifted he was at DIY in the home. And another stated that Mick had built himself up over the years in his career and had showed tremendous perseverance and ambition. And these views were an absolute shock and revelation to Mick, as he really had swallowed all the relationship brainwashing that Louise had given him. So spend time with friends and relatives who don't have a vested interest, even if that interest is comprised of resentment, in putting you down, but rather help make you feel better about yourself. People who are honest with you as well. Ask for honesty. You're not asking for them to build you up. This will serve to help balance your self-esteem. Number 7, confront your partner. People often don't know what they're like, and it can come as a real shock when we actually point something out to them. Just as Mick was shocked to learn that his friends didn't view him as some elephantine, blundering, slothful fool, as his wife seemed to, so too can some people really not know how obnoxious, dismissive, undermining and self-esteem destroying they're actually being. They may dismiss it as only joking or, I love you really, even though I haven't treated you at all well for years. Okay, so Mick started to ask Louise why she'd ever agreed to date him all those years ago if he was so terrible. She used this as an excuse to compare him back then to how he was now. And he told her how his friends felt differently about him than she seemed to. And she replied that they didn't really know him the way she knew him. She was the one who had to suffer living with him, as she put it. He told her he still loved her, but would leave her and find someone who loved him if things didn't change. And at that, she had cried, and at last started to make efforts of her own. So I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe, and if you want to hear when my next video is published, hit the notification bell below. I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge and hypnosisdownloads.com, and if you'd like to try some of my personal development products, head over to hypnosisdownloads.com and take a look around. And thanks for watching.